We're digging some test holes, checking to see what we're gonna encounter if we dig a pond here. Today, I thought I would start a documentation of a pond build that we're doing for a client. We're actually removing topsoil right now. And it's an interesting spot. They are going to use the pond for irrigation and also just to make their zone 1 space nicer, because they're gonna have events and some weddings and stuff like that, and it's sort of just a big marshy area right near the barn. And essentially we came and dug some test pits, and what we found was really intensely thick clay in this whole low spot. We're not going to go out this far. Our excavation is probably going to be about 60 by 100 or 60 by 80 rather over there. And what's interesting is that the water is coming from up there and it's moving down through this low spot. One skunk cabbage. Mostly this is loose strife. And it's moving towards where the excavator is working and then off to the left out of the frame. And this area that I was just in actually has a larger flow. So, and then in between there's this huge boulder. It's hard to see, but there's actually ledge there. So this is an outflow in the sense that the landscape goes up on both sides, and so if we were to stop this up at all, we would raise the level down there significantly, or we can work with this level as it is. This is going to be a rare type of pond that we build that's just essentially you just dig a big hole in the ground. It's very simple in this one because we're not having to make a huge berm. We are going to make a berm that is going to serve as access, but the pond level won't really be much influenced by that berm. That's going to prevent extra water from flowing past where the excavator is out into the fields where they're going to actually grow crops. So we'll dry up those fields to a significant extent, or at least prevent them from flooding. I don't think we're going to dry them out because they're pretty nice. But we are going to contain this flow with a berm over there, and we could raise up the water level to whatever height we need by raising this outflow and using what is now the secondary natural outflow as our main outflow. Either way, these two outflows are currently setting the height. We can make a berm and then raise these up a little bit to change the height. So I'll do a couple of videos as we work. Right now, the idea is we're stripping off the organic layer. We're getting all the plants and the topsoil that's accumulated, the hydric topsoil, off of the area and around where we're going to excavate. And then all the work that we do will be with just the very tight clay subsoil, reshaping, and then eventually we'll put that topsoil back on. So I just measured the outflow at that end is 3 feet lower than where I'm standing here, which is the diversion of the outflow, the upper outflow, and most of the water is coming from up there. So it's coming down the landscape here, and some of it gets that way. Probably 80% of it's coming towards me right now. So we're digging a little tiny swale from there to this outflow so that we'll catch almost all of that water and divert it out of the pond's basin during construction. You can see here there's a good chunk of water flowing through this way, and we're about to firm that up and stop it and bring it out this way. So yes, it looks like an enormous excavation. The pond is actually only going to be from around there, around to that way, to about up to there. Kind of where the water is naturally settling. That's the goal. We have to excavate that because we're going to make a berm there, and you can't make a berm with topsoil. So we strip the topsoil off to the side, strip that topsoil off to that side, a little bit of topsoil off to here, and now we're almost down to the subsoil, and then we're going to manipulate the subsoil, and that's what's going to be the material that we use to actually shape the pond. So for the most part, the pattern is going to be a bench on this side of 18 to 24-inch deep water, and we might chase that out to here a little bit so that we have emergent vegetation. Hopefully about a third of the pond's surface will be that, and then this part here is going to be basically as deep as we can get it, with as much water column of 8+ feet deep as we can get. Of course, the sides will come up and have a little bit of a bench for different kinds of vegetation, and then before it gets to the berm. But that 8 feet depth, at least in New York, is critical. You need a good chunk of that 8-foot depth, 8 foot plus, to get the pond to stay cool over the winter, or over the summer, sorry. If you have the whole thing shallower than that, then the whole thing can heat up, and that's when you get the crazy algae effects. So you need to have deep, cool pockets to keep that temperature, which keeps the biology right, which keeps the water quality right, and the oxygen, all of that. Very important to have shallow margins for emergent vegetation and deep cores for temperature and biology. So this is where our outflow is going to be. Well, it's the natural outflow, so we're really not going to actually change the water table very much at all. We're just going to expose this large chunk of water table by moving that material mostly over onto a berm, potentially up the upslope side, maybe fill in from the access down from up there into the berm. That's where most of the subsoil that we excavate out of the pond is going to go. So you don't want to move that farther than you have to. We used that unique feature of this particular location to our benefit here. We dug a little miniature swale, and it already cleared out, and we're sending almost all the water down the upslope side. This is 3 feet higher in elevation than our outflow, which is right where the excavator is. So this way we cut off all this water that was meandering towards our pond. So now very little is actually going there. So then we'll do all of our work, because you want to do work with the least amount of water in, getting into the soil that you're working with as possible. And this has actually become a very significant flow over here. So then when we're done, we can return this swale to its previous condition, maybe even dig a little bit of a suggestion of a channel out towards this way, so that we get quite a bit of water to recharge the pond. And it's a nice control valve up here that you can decide pretty easily how much is going to go towards your pond and how much is not going to go towards your pond. That's not always as simple as this concept. back for another day of work on this pond. The diversion trench that we dug up there is working perfectly. Most of the water is going that way, over and outside of the work zone. And now that it's dried up a little bit, we've had some really nice dry days. The day after we started work on this, we got hit with a lot of rain. Luckily, all the water drains into a very, very flat, completely vegetated field. Oh, a little turkey just showed up. And yeah, animals are very often attracted to disturbed areas. It's interesting. Lots of footprints in here. And we had to dig a little channel so that the water could make it out of this, so that when that rain came, it wouldn't prevent us from working. So it dried out, and what we see now is, you can look at the color. This dry, light-colored, bony clay zone, that's where I had planned on the berm. And luckily, that looks, and now that it's exposed, it looks exactly like what we want as the berm material. So we're not going to disturb any further. We just took the topsoil off that. And then this spot still looks mucky, and this is the pond excavation zone. So that pattern looks like it's going to work out really well. And then the water's flowing right over here. And after we dig the excavation, we can raise this up and put this in a sill. The ground goes up this way, so we have room to play there, where we could bring the level here up maybe a foot or so and control the water level in this whole impoundment. So, and then most of the spoils, we are going to go pretty deep, so most of the spoils are going to go onto this berm and get graded off that way. And then whatever we have extra is going to have to come up like this and get feathered out to grade going to that direction. Haven't updated in a little bit. We've done a lot of work since then. Shouldn't really be doing what we're doing right now, but we had no other option. We got most of the pond dug out yesterday, and then we got a little bit of rain. We hadn't quite finished, and we're just getting a little bit more material out right now just to get our 8-foot depth for that pocket, which I think we're at 9 over there and 8 in this region here. So it's pretty good. We're almost done messing around for today. This is the only rainy day. It's obviously not going to fill the pond up, so we'll be okay. And then we're going to come out and do some more grading with the top here. We're going to grade this up to that road, that approach, and then the berm is going to come out like this and go over that way, and then the spillway is going to be right there. So this is where we're at so far. So here we've got a little bit of a better day for working, and we've got the depth that we want. So although I moved it, the laser is placed on more or less the elevation where we want the outflow, and we've got 7-8 feet in a lot of the deepest part, and then we'll have sort of a steeper bench on those sides and a shallower bench on this side. And now we sort of have to just clean up the edge and then figure out a lot of the water that's going to fill the pond is coming from here and from the ground. In fact, all of this is groundwater. This just came right up. As you can see, it's pretty much came up clear. It looks muddy, but it's actually clear water with mud underneath it, not muddy water. As you can see over there where we just disturbed, that's muddy water. Anyways, so we've got groundwater, we've got a source of flowing water that's pretty clean that's going to come in here. So this pile of material that we got out just because we wanted to get the body excavated before any rains. Now we're going to push this over towards the outflow and deal with it there. Dominic is a super expert with this thing. He's been driving this since he was, when most people started playing with like playground toys, he pretty much started with these machines, so he's really good. This stuff was very wet when we were working with it last, which didn't last long because it was too bad, but now it's just as hard as a rock, which is exactly what you want for a pond. So let's take you down into the bottom, and see, we're at a pretty good depth. That's going to be a lot of water pounded in here, and it's probably a foot of standing water already here. It's almost all groundwater, so pretty happy with how it's coming along. And now what we're gonna do, once we clean up the edges and move this material off to shape the outflow, then we're gonna bring some of this material up to make this seamless transition up to where the truck is. And there's an interesting thing that's sort of emerging, as these tend to do. You come in with sort of a plan, but then the earth sort of shows you what does or does not make sense. It's a bit hard to describe, but if where the excavator is, so this pile right here, that's not us, that's natural. We just cut into the earth behind it. We did deposit a little material there, but there's basically, where my finger is, there's a berm that's natural, that's ledge, that is watertight. And that is at about the same elevation as our pile here. The water has to go that way. So we can actually grade out to that natural berm and then just put our sill somewhere around there, and we could actually back up water kind of as far as we want. I mean, obviously a foot or so lower than our berm is going to be the maximum height, but we can sort of extend our berm that way. We could extend this berm upwards, and we could sort of have a U shape and get a lot more water, although this part of the water here would be really shallow, but that's actually good because a lot of this vegetation would just, either some of it's already emergent vegetation or some emergent vegetation would take over, and then you have a really nice reed bed or something like that that would just be a natural huge percentage of the water surface area, which would just be a natural filter and keep this deep section really clean. Which I think this pond is situated to have incredibly good clean water because we've got groundwater, natural filtered water that's coming from a big natural area through a biological filter, and it's just all clean clay subsoil. I'll try to explain the outflow a little bit better. This little dried up bed here is where it was flowing out previously. So this was all more or less level from that wet meadow kind of area and eventually drained here. So by putting our berm a little bit higher, we're gonna push the water retained in the pond back into that flat area. The land goes up quite a bit on the other side, so we'll be okay there. And then on this side, we're just retained by a massive piece of ledge. So this whole thing is sort of a valley that comes like that and comes down, brings the water, and goes here. So we're gonna catch it. And then the only thing left to do is to sort of close the berm off between this ridge structure here and our berm that's high over here. So that material from that other side will come in here and fill that void for us. And then we'll have a cutout somewhere around here of a sill, and that'll be our primary outflow. That'll be our water control. And as I always do when I make ponds, I make those really, really wide so that they could handle an enormous volume of water. And you should basically, if you're not gonna go through and calculate it using like PECRAS stormwater modeling, just make it 3 times bigger than you ever could imagine needing. So you don't want to bring water right up to the top of your berm, obviously. A foot or so is kind of minimum freeboard. The bigger berm you get and the higher the water is, the more the risk, right? Because if there were to be a berm failure, then you're releasing a ton of water. So the outflow, you want it to be super level, super wide, very mild slope, and vegetated, ideally. So that an enormous amount of water could just laminar flow right over that. And then you should also have a backup outflow. So normally, like for stormwater modeling, you have your 10-year storm event outflow, and then you have extra other outflows for different size storms, and you calculate how much water are we going to expect to get in a 24-hour period, and our outflow better be able to handle the amount that's going to be coming out of it, or the water level will go up and then go over your berm somewhere, the lowest point, and potentially blow it out. I don't build ponds with fancy control structures. I just like to work with the natural land and make sure that wherever that water is going to flow over has very gentle slope, very wide sill, so that it can handle a preposterous amount of water. Yeah, anyway, I'll do another update once we get this a little bit more shaped up towards that picture.